Anyone need a sheet? You know the words. Jaya Radha Madhava. Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parijikacharya Astotar the Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parijikacharya Astotar the Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavini Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad-Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 19th day of October 2022 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad-Bhagavad Gita as it is. Translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we're studying chapter 7 entitled Knowledge of the Absolute. And we're on text 24 on page 334 in most of your books, I think. Okay. Michael, don't put the book on the That's okay. Okay. Avyaktam vyaktim apannam manyante mam abuddhaya param bhavam ajananto mamavyayam anuttamam avyaktam vyaktamapannam manyante mam abuddhaya param bhavam ajananto mamavyayam anuttamam avyaktam vyaktamapannam manyante mam abuddhaya param bhavam ajananto mamavyayam anuttamam avyaktam vyaktamapannam manyante mam abuddhaya param bhavam ajananto mamavyayam anuttamam. Rajamandala. Avyaktam vyaktamapannam manyante mam abuddhaya param bhavam ajananto. Let's try that line again. Mamavyayam anuttamam. No, just the last two words. Mam avyayam anuttamam. Mamavyayam anuttamam. Who's next? Anyone else want to try?
I can try.
Who's that? Go ahead.
I'm Tapas.
Go ahead, Papas.
Avyaktam vyaktam apannam
Avyaktam vyaktamapannam
manyate mam abuddhaya
manyante mam abuddhaya
param bhavam ajananto
param bhavam ajananto
mama avyayam anuttamam.
mamavyayam anuttamam. You've gotten better since you went back to India. He's in India, 10,000 miles away. Nice to hear you, Tapas. Anyone else? Okay. Avyaktam, non-manifested. Vyaktim, personality. Apannam, achieved. Manyante, think. Mam, me. Abuddhaya, less intelligent persons. Param, supreme. Bhavam, existence. Ajanantaha, without knowing. Mama, my. Abhyayam, imperishable. Anuttamam, the finest. Translation. Krishna says, unintelligent men who do not know me perfectly think that I, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, was impersonal before and have now assumed this personality. Due to their small knowledge, they do not know my higher nature, which is imperishable and supreme. Purport. Those who are worshippers of demigods have been described as less intelligent persons. And here the impersonalists are similarly described. Lord Krishna in his personal form is here speaking before Arjuna. And still, due to ignorance, impersonalists argue that the Supreme Lord ultimately has no form. Yamanacharya, a great devotee of the Lord in the disciplic succession of Ramanujacharya, has written a very appropriate verse in this connection. He says, Tvam shila rupa chaditai padama prakrishtai sadve nasatvikataya prabalaishta sastrai prakyata daiva paramarta vedamataischa naivasura prakritiya prabhavanti bodhum. My dear Lord, devotees like Vyasadeva and Narada know you to be the personality of Godhead. By understanding different Vedic literatures, one can come to know your characteristics, your form, and your activities. And one can understand that you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But those who are in the modes of passion and ignorance, the demons, the non-devotees, cannot understand you. They are unable to understand you. However expert such non-devotees may be in discussing Vedanta and the Upanishads and other Vedic literatures, it is not possible for them to understand the personality of Godhead. Stotra Ratna 12. In the Brahma Samhita, it is stated that the personality of Godhead cannot be understood simply by study of the Vedanta literature. Only by the mercy of the Supreme Lord can the personality of the Supreme be known. Therefore, in this verse, it is clearly stated that not only are the worshippers of the demigods less intelligent, but those non-devotees who are engaged in Vedanta and speculation on Vedic literature without any tinge of true Krishna consciousness are also less intelligent. And for them, it is not possible to understand God's personal nature. Persons who are under the impression that the Absolute Truth is impersonal are described as abuddhaya, which means those who do not know the ultimate feature of the Absolute Truth. In the Srimad-Bhagavatam, it is stated that supreme realization begins from the impersonal Brahman and then rises to the localized Supersoul. But the ultimate word in the Absolute Truth is the personality of Godhead. Modern impersonalists are still less intelligent, for they do not even follow their great predecessor Shankaracharya, who has specifically stated that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Impersonalists, therefore, not knowing the Supreme Truth, think Krishna to be only the son of Devaki and Vasudeva, or a prince or a powerful living entity. This is also condemned in the Bhagavad Gita, 9:11. Avajanande mamudha manushim tanam ashritam. Only the fools regard me as an ordinary person. The fact is that no one can understand Krishna without rendering devotional service and without developing Krishna consciousness. The Bhagavatam 10.14.29 confirms this. Atapite deva padambujadvaya pasadaleshanugita evahi janati tattvam bhagavan mahimno nachanheko pichadam vichinvan. My Lord, if one is favored by even a slight trace of the mercy of your lotus feet, he can understand the greatness of your personality. But those who speculate to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead are unable to know you, even though they continue to study the Vedas for many years. One cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, or his form, qualities, or name simply by mental speculation or by discussing Vedic literature. One must understand him by devotional service. When one is fully engaged in Krishna consciousness, beginning by chanting the Maha Mantra, all together, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Then only can one understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Non-devotee impersonalists think that Krishna has a body made of this material nature and that all his activities, his form, and everything are Maya. These impersonalists are known as Mayavadis. They do not know the ultimate truth. The 20th verse clearly states, Kamais taistai rita jnana papadyante anyadevata. Those who are blinded by lusty desires surrender unto the different demigods. It is accepted that besides the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there are demigods who have their different planets, and the Lord also has a planet. As stated in the 23rd verse, Devan Devi Ajo Yanti Modbhakta Yanti Mamapi. The worshippers of the demigods go to the different planets of the demigods, and those who are devotees of Lord Krishna go to the Krishna Loka planet. Excuse me. Although this is clearly stated, the foolish impersonalists still maintain that the Lord is formless and that these forms are impositions. From the study of the Gita, does it appear that the demigods and their abodes are impersonal? Clearly, neither the demigods nor Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, are impersonal. They are all persons. Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he has his own planet, and the demigods have theirs. Therefore, the monistic contention that ultimate truth is formless and that form is imposed does not hold true. It is clearly stated here that it is not imposed. From the Bhagavad Gita we can clearly understand that the forms of the demigods and the forms of the Supreme Lord are simultaneously existing, and that Lord Krishna is Satchit Ananda, eternal blissful knowledge. The Vedic literature confirms that the Supreme Absolute Truth is knowledge and blissful pleasure. Vijnanam Anandam Brahma. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad 3.9.28. And that he is the reservoir of unlimited auspicious qualities. Ananta Kalyana Gunatmako Sao. Vishnu Purana 6.5.84. And in the Gita, the Lord says that although he is Aja, unborn, he still appears. These are the facts that we should understand from the Bhagavad Gita. We cannot understand how the Supreme Personality of Godhead can be impersonal. The imposition theory of the impersonalist monist is false as far as the statements of the Gita are concerned. It is clear herein that the Supreme Absolute Truth, Lord Krishna, has both form and personality. Okay, time out. Hare Krishna. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Midatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with a torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Shri Parampara. So before I say anything on this verse, I don't want to forget, as I did last night. First of all, thank you all for coming. I have your beads. Hare Krishna. But I forgot to mention that it's very auspicious to offer lamps to Lord Krishna during this time of year. It's a special month called the month of Damodar. And I started doing the kirtan, and one person came up and offered a lamp because no one knew. So if you didn't offer it this morning, which many of you haven't, then please, we have enough out there so that during the kirtan, you'll offer a lamp to Krishna. Very auspicious. So, as are many verses in this chapter, this one is often quoted. And Krishna has, if you recall, he's explained why demigod worship is not very auspicious. Starting in text 20, he said, Kamais taista riddhigyanam abudnyate anya devata, that those who worship other gods, demigods besides me, their intelligence has been stolen away by material desire. Kamais taista means various material desires, has taken away their real knowledge. And therefore, they worship these demigods according to their own natures for material benefit. Then he says, whatever God you have want to have faith in, or you have faith, want to worship, I will make that faith strong from within. Krishna is within our hearts. That's Supersoul. And I pointed out yesterday that here in America, you don't have so much demigod worship. Maybe from Indians who come, they worship demigods. But generally speaking, people are worshiping God, or more and more they're becoming, they don't belong to any religion. They're just spiritual. People are doing that. But here he's speaking about the demigod worshippers, and he says, I will make your faith strong. And I pointed out that if you look at it in a broader context, here we are again, after so many years, coming on elections, right? National elections, everyone knows that. So it's a kind of worship. They propagandize themselves. They have advertising. They try to convince you that if you just vote for me, all your problems will be solved. Whatever. But when people go, they give their vote, or they give money, or they give adulation. It's clearly a kind of worship, and you expect to get something back from it. You expect to get some, material well-being. Your taxes will go down or something like that. So it's rudimentary, but it's the same idea. That faith is coming from within because you want to believe, and because you're ignorant. You're surrounded by ignorance. You don't know what's really worshipable, and so you get in that vulnerable position, you can easily be convinced. So much art of advertising, political advertising, so forth. So that's what's going on. And what here Krishna is speaking about the demigods, but it's the same thing. And what happens? With that faith, you worship your god or goddess, and you may get something that seems to be coming from them. But whatever they can give you is actually, Krishna says, I'm actually empowering them to do that. Krishna is all-powerful. He's giving them the power to give you fulfill your desires limitedly. And of course, in that case, and you'll increase your faith, like that. But then what does he say in text 23? Not very intelligent. Antavatu palamtesham tadbavalt elpamadisam. Elpamadisam means small intelligence, small brain. Those who worship the demigods. Because the fruits that they get, whatever it may be, are temporary. And the first lesson of the Bhagavad Gita is that we are eternal. As spirit souls, we're eternal. We're never born and we'll never die. But we'll keep occupying different bodies, which means suffering, as long as we don't return to our original place in the spiritual world, where everything is spirit. Now we're in a world that's a mixture of matter and spirit. We, the living entities, are spiritual beings. But we're surrounded by, remember, earth, water, fire, air, ether. There's this list at the beginning of this chapter of the material energies. Our bodies are temporary machines. And eventually they break down. And what happens to us? We go on to another body. And the vehicle of that transmigration, Krishna describes in the 15th chapter very graphically, is your subtle body. Your mind, your intelligence, and your ego. All of the unfulfilled desires that you have, and your karma. There's a big mix in calculating just what body you're going to be in. Krishna is overseeing that. He's a witness of everything. He knows our thoughts and everything. But we have some free will as human beings, not like the animals. They're just working according to instinct, more or less. They're not responsible. They're not getting any karma. The lion goes after the gazelle, that innocent gazelle, that lion's going to get punished. No, that's his nature. He's going to go up to the next, animal that he's scheduled to, on his way to being a human being in a human body. And the gazelle will also go on to the next one, But for human beings, we're meant to understand Dharma, the rules, the natural rules and the rules of God, and work accordingly so we can avoid sin and purify our existence and ultimately escape from the rounds of birth and death. That's the idea. So Krishna is making this point. So he's criticized the demigod worshippers. Even if you succeed and you get some benediction, it's temporary and it just binds you more to this material world. Only if you worship me, and he says that specifically, Devan Devya Joyanti, the worshippers of the gods and goddesses, go to the gods and goddesses. Because that's who you're worshiping, that's who you're thinking of, that's who you're praying to. Mad bhakta yanti mamapi. But my bhaktas, my devotees, come to me. So what's the advantage of that? Hello? Vaikuntha? Vaikuntha means the world free of all anxiety. This world, there must be anxiety. We just went through this whole thing years long with the pandemic, and then there's all these personal things. The economy is out of whack. I couldn't believe it. I went to buy something. I couldn't find any organic apples in our local grocery store here, the walk-in, where you get them for free. No more organic apples. So I had to go, okay, I got to find it, because I have this strict diet. And so I go to Sprouts. $4 a pound for organic apples. So I got to have organic apples. So I bought it by, when I grew up, I remember when I first started. Anyway, it's a long story. But at a certain point, I was following a raw food diet and everything. So there was a lot of fruits and everything. So I went shopping. I said, 29 cents a pound for apples. Now in those days, we didn't know organic, inorganic. It wasn't anything, but 29 cents a pound. So it's a burden. But to try to, that's another thing about in the material world. Suddenly, what's it going to be? Is it going to be medicine, or is it going to be breakfast? A lot of people live on that level, So, you may get some benediction from the God, but it won't help you ultimately. You'll be stuck here in the material world. So we want to go to Krishna. Mad bhakta yanti mamapi. So now, in the verse we read today, he's illuminating what position the impersonalists have, who don't believe in any gods or goddesses. Avyaktam vyaktam. They think that my personality, that I achieved it from an impersonal state, that the ultimate reality is what's called Brahman, a white light. That's the ultimate. And then when a piece of that Brahman is kind of chipped off, then it becomes either a human body or the body of God. That Krishna's body is ultimately also material. It's very offensive, these Mayavadis. They don't have any real understanding of the reality. And Prabhupada, he cites so many nice verses here. but one of the ones that he references is a verse in the second chapter of the first canto, describing the different levels of the absolute truth. He says, "Vadanti tat tattva vidas." That's a very important phrase. Those who know the truth say, the realized souls, the great acharyas and the realized, but those are tattva vida, and they know the tattva, the truth. What do they say about the absolute truth? Vadanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yajnanam advayam. This non-dual absolute substance has three phases. And you can realize it according to your method of approach. One is the impersonal Brahman, the absolute with no features, no qualities, just pure spirit. But that's just one phase. Then the next phase is the Paramatma, or Supersoul, in everyone's heart. Krishna expands. He's not in everyone's heart, and not just the human beings, but every living entity, and in every atom. He's sustaining the whole universe. And then, but that's not the ultimate either. The yogis, the real yogis, they meditate on that super soul in the heart, and if they do it right, they can realize that. But generally, what happens with the yogis is that in the process of doing this austere thing we read about in the 6th chapter, those who were here, is that you develop certain powers, certain mystic powers. Some say there's some evidence that Jesus Christ spent time in India for some time, and he developed some yogic powers. One of them is being lighter than the lightest, walking on water. Yeah, I'm not going to go into the whole details of that, but there's some evidence for that. But that's certainly true. I mean, even today, Srila Prabhupada points out that every 12 years there's a big festival in India. I mean, festival, it's like 33 million people come to gather at the confluence of these three rivers, the Yamuna and the Ganges, very famous, and there's one that's not manifested now called the Saraswati. And it's said that if you bathe in that confluence at just the right astrological time, and it's always in January, and it's in northern India, and it's freezing. And so people come anyway by the millions, because the promise is, if you bathe at that time, you can get liberation. Like it's a shortcut to liberation. So, Prabhupada, he lived in Allahabad, which is the place where that is called Prayag now. That's it. And he went to those, even as after he started the movement, he took devotees twice to one of those. And they didn't go for liberation. They went to preach. They did a lot of kirtan, and they distributed a lot of prasadam and books for those who are interested, because there's millions of pilgrims from all things. So he pointed out, for the devotees, because nobody knew anything, they were just, with Prabhupada. So you see them, those are the yogis that came down from the Himalayas for this. And a lot of times they walk around naked, and they look pretty young. He said, they may look like they're 40 years old, but they could be 200 years old. Because practicing this, even today, they practice the pranayama, you slow down the breathing. And you slow down the breathing, and you slow down your metabolism and everything, and you can live a lot longer. But that's not the goal. All right, you live 200 years, but then you still die. If you don't develop bhakti for Krishna, then you're going to come back. And the problem with the yogis is that I said you can develop certain powers, reading minds. You can get things from a distance, and there's 8 of them. And Prabhupada tells the story of this one fellow who, the British ruled India for hundreds of years, So, it's in Delhi, I think it was in Delhi or Bombay. And there was a yogi came, and he was walking around naked. So the British, they're trying to instill Christian morals and things, for the heathen. So they arrested him, put him in jail. Next day, he's out walking again. What's this? Arrested him, put him in jail, walking. He had the power, the small of the smallest, he could get through the keyhole. I swear, this is real stuff, So you can imagine, if you're not, trained in bhakti, how you can get enamored of these shaktis, right? Like the one guy, he could make some gold dust, and he cashed in, and he became very famous. I'm not going to name names. But it's, let's go to America. So that's not bhakti. So therefore, Lord Chaitanya says, Bhukti Mukti Siddhi Kami Sakali Ashanta. Krishna Bhakta Nishkama Atta Eva Shanta. How to get real peace? Peace of mind, absolute peace. So he says, the bhukti kami, the word kami comes from the word kama, those who want to enjoy material happiness, vast majority of people, you know. They're not peaceful because either you get it or you don't get what you're desiring. If you get it, there's a danger of losing it. Whether it's a person, money, your beauty, you know, whatever, your health, right? There's all kinds of anxiety about losing it. So there's that. And then if you don't get it, that's even worse. You know, then you're depressed and you know. So, but and if you do get it, there's a certain time, satisfied, now I got it made. But it's very ephemeral. So you can never be really peaceful. I mean, deep, peaceful, satisfaction in any circumstance. So bhukti kami, they're not peaceful. Then there's the mukti kamis, those who simply want to get free from all misery. And they're really out, you know, to escape from birth and death. Now we've been talking about that, so I'll explain the reconciliation with devotional life. But that's all they want. That's their goal. So they leave the city. They go off into the mountains, you know, and they're trying very hard for their own deliverance. But if they're not bhaktas, then even if they are able to get up to the Brahman platform that I mentioned, and at that point they feel free because they're you know, surrounded by the white light and they're not burdened by a material body. But that's not secure because it's not the natural position of the soul. We ourselves are eternal persons. And we can never be satisfied by negating that personality, which means that activity and that form, and just being pure consciousness. It's a relief at first because you're not going to die, you know, you don't have a material body. But it's not fulfilling for the soul because we are persons. And what we're looking for is that eternal interaction of love with the Supreme Person and the spiritual world. So they're not peaceful. Then you have the siddhi kamis. I just spoke about the yogis. They're called siddhis, certain perfections. There's 8 basic ones. And we've seen the stories of Devasa Muni or Vishwamitra, is that they're not peaceful either, because they've got these powers, but then there's some other yogi has more powers, you know. And even if they have the powers, they're still not enjoying that rasa, that relationship with Krishna. So it's not satisfying. So he says all these 3. The only ones who can be really peaceful are the bhaktas, because they don't have any material desires. If you just visualize it like this, is that the great acharyas, like the Goswamis, we have these 6 Goswamis, and there's a beautiful song describing how 3 of them were very wealthy, or they were heirs to enormous wealth. Sanatana Goswami, Rupa Goswami, and Raghunath Das Goswami. Raghunath Das Goswami was the sole heir of a huge, his father and his uncle were great zamindars, that means landholders in Bengal. And he was the only son, you know. But he was so much enamored of Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, and the chant. He wasn't interested. He had a wonderful wife, very chaste, very beautiful, you know. But he was just trying to scheme, how can I get out of here and go enjoy Lord Chaitanya in Puri, you know. So he became the emblem of renunciation. He even compared to the other Goswamis, he was extreme. I won't go into detail, but what was the actual nature of their consciousness, day to day, moment to moment? So it describes like this. It says, "Tyaktva turna mashesha mandalapati shrening sada tuchavat bhutva dina ganeshiko kadonaya kopina kantashito." That these Goswamis, especially these 3 I mentioned, Tyaktva turnam, when they encountered Lord Chaitanya, they quickly gave up their position. Rupa and Sanatana were the right and left hand men of the king, the prime minister and the finance minister. You can imagine, you know, of the Muslim king. But Rupa Goswami cashed out a big boat of gold. He sold it all. And cashed it in. He gave half of it to the Brahmins and the Vaishnavas. He gave a quarter of it to his family, so they won't cause any trouble. And then a quarter of it, which is still millions of dollars, he kept, get this now, with an honest grocer. You can imagine where you're going to find an honest grocer. Could you hold this $10 million, please, for a little while? Yeah. So, but that's the way it was in those days, for emergencies. He went to Vrindavan. His brother was arrested by the king because he's a prime minister. You know, he suddenly quit. He started reading the Bhagavatam instead of going to work. So he said, no, there's no good. So he arrested him. So how to get out of jail? So he had this, a Muslim, Muslim was his jailer. And so he said, look, I'll give you, 2,000 pieces of gold. You just let me out of here. And the jailer said, no, I can't. What is the king going to say? What if he finds out? So it's okay. Here's another 2 million. You just tell him that, I went to use the bathroom, which means I had to go to the river. And I jumped in and I washed away, and I don't know where he went. He's gone. He's dead, You just tell him that story. So he said, all right, it sounds like a decent deal, good story. So he got out. He said he walked to Vrindavan. And so now that, and Bhagavad Das also, he snuck away at night and he was able to get away from his home. They tried to keep him. And so then eventually he also went to Vrindavan. He stayed with Lord Chaitanya for years and witnessed all these amazing pastimes in Anjalila. But then this verse was written by one of their disciples, Srinivasacharya. And he says, they gave up all of this power and money and influence as insignificant. And they took on the most austere form of life. Buddha Dina Ganeshakal means in order to act as spiritual leaders for the people in general. And that includes us, because they're writing all these books that we still have. And they took on loincloths and just the most simple kind of life. So, but how could they live? Prabhupada tells a story about a materialist, a big lawyer who joined Gandhi's program. And he went from being, making a lot of money to being just a beggar on the street, in joining his movement. And he couldn't take it. He committed suicide. Because materially, if you're born poor and you're living poor, you get used to it. But if you have a lot of money, suddenly you're thrown down into the poverty-stricken. Oh, what happened, So, but they didn't have that. They were in bliss. So the third line tells their state of consciousness. It says, Takvatona Masheshna Manu Sedas Tutchabat Budvadina Ganeshako Karaniya Kopina Kandashideo Gopi Bhavada Samatabda Lahari Kallola Magno Mahur. Now, in Krishna consciousness, there are different levels, there are different relationships you can have with Krishna. And I won't get into detail, but the basic top three, or top four, the servanthood, which is you're the eternal servant of Krishna, which is fine. Or even more intimate is a friend. Imagine being the friend of God, And he hides his majesty. So with his intimate friends in Gokula, Govinda, he plays with them out in the forest. Can you imagine having a job? Their job was to take care of the cows. They're very valuable. But all day, the job is mainly you take them out, they graze, and you play. You're playing all day. And then you come back, you play the flute, and the whole thing is just lila. So they're very intimate with Krishna. They'll wrestle with him, and sometimes he'll let them win, He's Supreme Personality. It's wonderful. So that's very good. But then even more intimate, more intense is Vatsalya Ras, like Mother Yashoda, which we're glorifying so much this month, where she doesn't know he's God at all, and they don't know either, the friends. But she loves him more than anything, and he hides his opulence and majesty to evoke all of this intimate, loving affairs. And then most intimate of all is the gopis, the girlfriends. He's dancing with them in the forest, and so forth. And it says, oh, this is very immoral. Not really, because they're all his energies. Anyway, it's a whole. I'm not going to get into detail now, but this is where the variety of activities and ways in which interact with Krishna, that's fulfilling for the soul. So here, Krishna, the verse that we read is avyaktam vyaktimapanam. Some think that my form is derived from the impersonal. Avyakta means unmanifested. I become manifested. Vyaktam. I've attained. Manyante mama buddha. They think that about me, and they're foolish. Abuddhaya, not very intelligent. They don't know that my supreme nature as a person, that purely spiritual, they're thinking that anything that has a form has to be a form like us. Means that, okay, it's made of matter. But that's not true for Krishna's body. It's Satchidananda Vigraha, the very first verse of the Brahma Samhita. A form composed of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. We can't even conceive of it. But the wonderful thing is that we have a form like that too. We've lost touch with it because we're minute, we're very, very tiny, but Krishna is infinite like the sun. So nothing can cover him. That's why it says here, anuttamam means the finest or above everything else. And avyayam means it never degrades. Our body degrades, a material body. So this is a lot of ignorance. And you find when there's this question of refuting impersonalism, there's always a long purport. So some of these verses here, Srila Prabhupada is quoting Atapite Deva. The whole idea is that Krishna, he reserves the right of not being manifest as he is to those who are ignorant or who are offensive to him. So that even to the point where they don't think he exists. Or if they see him, like you read the Krishna book, the 10th canto. I was just reading in the chapter of Poundraka. You remember Poundraka? Poundraka was someone who was so deluded, he thought that he was God. And he dressed up as Krishna. And he had like a fake conch shell, and it was like a forearm form. And then he sends a messenger to Krishna to challenge him to battle, because he thinks that he really convinced himself he's God. Really mad, So Krishna, he cut off his head, which is a blessing, with the chakra. And it's a whole story. But the point is that the living entity, when out of the realm of pure devotion, it can delude himself into believing so many things that aren't true. I mean, in today's world, we can see the danger of believing so many things that aren't true. No matter what side you're on the politics, you're thinking the other side is crazy. How could they believe such things, right? And the fact is that everyone is deluded. It's just different varieties of delusion, in different modes. And none of it really solves the problems of human life. So we're getting actual truth here. Krishna is saying, Param Bhav Majan, they do not know my supreme nature, ignorant of my supreme nature, which is this wonderful verse in the Brahma Samhita, first verse. Ishvara Parama Krishna, Satchidananda Vigraha, Anadir Adir Govinda, Sarva Karana Karanam. So a very rich verse. Ishvara Parama Krishna. So this, Prabhupada will speak often on this point. That we ourselves are little Ishwaras. Ishwara means a controller. We have our little realm of control. It may just be our apartment, it may be our tent, it may be, whatever. But we have some control in our life. But then there's people above us, there's other, stronger. So there's a hierarchy. That's why it's Ishvara Parama Krishna. Parama means the supreme controller, you see. So like we've been learning that the demigods, they can be very powerful, like Indra, Brahma, but they all recognize ultimately when Indra finally, sobers up, that yes, Krishna is supreme, and even Brahma. This prayer that we read, that's in the purport here, Atapi De Deva, this is uttered by Brahma after he was bewildered about Krishna because he's a little child, he wasn't even a cow herd, he was a calf herd, and he goes out and. This big demon, this big snake demon, Agasura, gets killed. Then the boys go to the bank of the river, and they're just having lunch. And so Krishna says, Brahma says, this can't be God, my source. This can't be Vishnu. How is that possible? So what he does is he steals the calves, puts them to sleep in some mystic slumber, and Krishna goes to find them, can't find them, comes back, the boys are gone. He took the boys and put them under mystic slumber. He's testing Krishna. So, remember what he does, Jean? Okay.
He expands Krishna crazy.
Yeah. So this is he expands himself into because after all of the boys have mothers, and all of the calves, he's a calf herd, they all have mothers too, in the cows. So Krishna says, I can't go back alone. And there's no boys and calves. The cows and mothers will be distraught, without their boys. So he expands himself into identical boys with all their idiosyncrasies, so even the mothers can't tell. Same thing with the calves. And he just goes on with his lila like that. Now, you have to remember that Brahma's time scale is completely different. He lives for 100 years by his count, but you may have heard this number before. But his 100 years are, who remembers roughly? No. How many? One of our years is equal to how many of? How many years? His 100 years in Earth time. You remember? No? 311 trillion and 40 billion. But by that time, 40 billion is just a what is it called? A little error, rounding error. So now he's gone for a moment of his time, but it's a year on Earth. So for a whole year, Krishna's been just engaging in the regular pastimes. And the amazing thing is, because when Krishna would kill these demons, all the boys, they would sing, they would make up songs, and they would come back and tell their mothers, oh, Krishna killed this demon, this could. But they didn't tell anything. For a whole year, they didn't say anything about killing this big Aghasura demon. So Balaram was thinking, what is that? What happened? Even Balaram was puzzled. So anyway, Brahma comes back, and he says, what's this? There's Krishna playing normally with the boys and calves. I got them hidden away in the mountain. And he goes and checks. They're still slumbering there, So what happened? So finally he can't figure it out. So it's called Brahma Vimohan Lila. Means that Brahma is bewildered. So he comes down, and then Krishna manifests all those thousands of boys and calves turned suddenly into Vishnu forms. And they all wearing wonderful Tulsi garlands, and everything is, the whole universe is worshipping them. So Brahma is stunned; he's like speechless. And finally, he bows down and he starts offering these prayers. And one of them is this prayer, "Atapite deva padam mudradaya," which is important. Which means, without a little mercy of your lotus feet, no one can understand you. Janati tattvam, can understand you in truth. O Bhagavan, Mahimno, the glories of you. Nachanya eko pichadam vichindvan, even though they may speculate for millions of years based on the Vedas. You see? So the idea is that only by Krishna's grace can we understand anything about him. And that gives us a chance. Because that means if we just humble ourselves and we chant Hare Krishna and we try to approach Krishna with prayer, not challenging and speculating, then we could actually become more enlightened than these Mayavadi speculators. And we can be on the auspicious path. So that's what Krishna is telling us here in this chapter. Here's what things are going on. And he tells about the material energy, the spiritual energy, and then he's describing how you want to see me? See me within this world at first. Taste some water, that's me. Rasoham apsakonte, the light of the sun and the moon, remember me when you see that. I've arranged it, illuminated. So that gradually you can see this whole world is sacred, it's divine, because it's Krishna's energy. And so are we. So we can regain our divine nature by remembering Krishna and trying to use the material energy, especially our own facilities, in his service. Then from within he enlightens us. Otherwise he reserves the right that you won't understand anything. You can't force, you can't, by speculation, you'll never make it. That's why he says, abuddhaya, those who think that, I've assumed this form, and you can, a million different ways you can go off the track. So this is why we've been given the nice process, parampara, Krishna speaking to us in the Gita, and with his pure devotees explaining it. And if we just begin the process, plug them in your beats, and start chanting rounds. Start with 2 rounds, that's what I did for a long time. It's good. And you'll see, you'll be, everything you read will become more impactful. You'll see, and that's true of all of us. So anyway, I've kind of gone a little far afield. Is there any discussion on any of these points? These 2 verses we read. We read. No, I guess we just read this one verse with a long purport. Yeah, it's an important verse. He's defeating the Mayavadis here. And it's not the only place. So we can resume tomorrow, let's see. Monday. Yeah, I don't know if we have time to read another verse. Hare Krishna. So I can share what... Oh yes, go ahead, Fatimandala. We need... Where's the other mic? Yeah.
You kind of were speaking about it a little bit before, but these purports seem that Prabhupada goes into a lot of depth and explanation about the impersonalist point of view, and how you were saying in the West we don't really grow up with that at all. So is he speaking more towards like the Indian point of view, or is he speaking more towards like the Western audience? Because he does go into it. It seems like a lot.
Yeah, he's understanding that this is, he's writing the book in America. He wrote this in '67. He typed some of it out, and then he got the dictaphone. He started dictating. It was faster, but it also created a few more mistakes because he had to rely on the transcribers. You can imagine all these Sanskrit verses in here. They couldn't understand them. They just put a blank in there, and then the editors had to come by later on and put them in. But yeah, he's understanding it's a worldwide movement, and in India, this is a much bigger problem because there's official. Let me put it this way: that there are actually people who ascribe to the philosophy and serious Mayavadis. So he's putting this argument in here, and we also should remember that Prabhupada is taking a lot of his commentary ideas from Baladev Vijayabhushan. As you see at the very beginning of the book, there's a dedication page. He dedicates the book to Baladev Vijayabhushan. The word Vijayabhushan, it's an honorary. He wasn't born with that. It means one who has an ornament of knowledge. It's especially for someone who's very, learned. So he was a great disciple of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and he wrote a commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, which Prabhupada referred to. And I would guess, if I check this, I can do it, that this verse, Hiranyamaya, are quoted in his commentary, and so he's quoting it. So it's a combination. We also should understand, the impersonalist tendencies that come. It may not be the official Mayavad philosophy, but the whole atheistic frame of mind, which will be explained in the 16th chapter. We're very much confronted with that. And even if people superficially believe in God, if they don't have a firm conception of what that means for their own lives, then that's also can block them from really understanding what Krishna really is. So yeah, there's some of this in here. So how does this relate to me? But ultimately, we've all had some of that impersonal in us. Otherwise, we wouldn't have turned away from Krishna and been in the material world for so long. But it's a mix, because Prabhupada didn't spend so much time in India. Today, just as a matter of course, I would say 75% of the devotees in the movement are in India. Yeah, and the vast majority of the books are being distributed there, which is quite amazing because Prabhupada left India because he couldn't make any headway, but he knew if he got the Americans involved, the Westerners, and came back to India, there would be a gas. What is this? Dancing white elephants. He saw them. And there's some wonderful stories about that first team that went to India in the 70s, in 1970, and went with Prabhupada, and it's changed the whole tone of the movement. So yeah, it's a good point because someone says, well, there's a lot of stuff in here that I can't understand and doesn't seem to be pertinent to me. But ultimately, it's good to know these things for all of us. All right, I wanted to share one verse. Let's see, what time is it now? It's almost time. So this is a verse. So I'll have to remember it now. It's in the 11th canto, and it combines what we're reading in the morning, which is the amazing story of a Jamil who was saved from going to hell by just chanting the name of his son, who was named Narayan. It's a long story, but Narayan is the holy name of Krishna. And because he chanted that name, or because he uttered that name, without any offense, he was crying out to his son, who was named Narayan. The actual Narayan immediately sent his messengers to save him from being hauled off to hell by what they call the Yamadutas. So it's the power of the holy name to deliver us, and it's what we need. And the combination of that, how merciful Krishna is to empower his name like that, and the Damodar Leela, which is characterized by Mother Yashoda conquering Krishna, tying up, not with the ropes, but with the ropes of love, which we sing every morning, her loving song. So let me see if I can remember this verse. Vishajati vridiham niyasa sakshad hadada vishaba hatav bigaganasha pranaya vasaniha tutang vipadma sabhavati bhagavata pratana ukta. Which means that the great devotees First he's saying that that Krishna can never leave their hearts. And an evidence of how merciful he is that even if you chant his name once indifferently, he's inclined to destroy mountains of sin. It's in the first part of the verse. And so, but he really doesn't leave the hearts of pranaya vasannaya. Pranaya vasannaya means literally the ropes of love. And that's exactly what Mother Yashoda ties Krishna with. Pranaya dritangvi padma. Sabhavati Bhagavata. The great devotees are those who have captured Krishna by their intense love, which is like, and therefore they won't let him out of their hearts. They keep him bound in his heart by their intense love, and he likes that. You know, he likes to become subordinate. That's what the whole Damodar Leela is. And evidence of how merciful he is and how loving he is that he agrees to empower his name, that you can get rid of so many sins just by chanting his name. So this is a sign of how merciful he is. So I thought I'd share that with you. I'll probably do it again Monday when I give class. All right, we need to go to Kirtan. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to offer the lamp. Very auspicious. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.